By the way, Christ is the only religious figure. If you study there's a big, huge archive of near-death experiences with several thousand of them, and that you can actually research them. It's called the near-death experience data bank, and you can actually go there and look at things. But anyway, though, about 20% of the time, people identify Jesus Christ in some bodily form in their near-death experience. They don't, less than 1% of the time, every other religious figure.
Wow.
So it's like Muhammad or Vishnu or whatever, Buddha. So but almost 20% of the time, Jesus is identified. And then Jesus additionally is identified as the loving white light. Sometimes they just call a loving white light God, sometimes Jesus. But the point is definitely very much associated with Christianity. And I've got some of those things footnoted again in my book, Science at the Doorstep to God.
And so this idea of soul-body separation at death, which is death.
Yeah.
Right? The sort of philosophical definition of death is soul-body separation.
Well, yes. And of course, you can resuscitate a patient if it's just, for example, a heart matter or a drowning or something of that nature. And so soul-body separation can happen sometimes when there are still a few sputterings of neurons like I said, in the lower brain. So, because the heart attack, is so sudden that the soul body separation almost happens, right away. For all intents and purposes, in the near-death experiences, once resuscitation measures are taken, that soul goes literally, they might be at the brink of heaven, talking to their relatives, being, completely engulfed by a loving white light. They identify as Christ or something, and then bingo, they're right back. So they go through the dark tunnel into the light that's beyond, and then all of a sudden they're pulled back. And that also includes people who have a dark experience. So about 80% of adults more or less have a very good experience. About 20% of adults have a very dark experience. But you see, we only know this from 20% of the adults because only 20% of adults who have undergo clinical death have a near-death experience. Now, the rate is much higher in children. If children undergo clinical death, I think it's like 60% of them have some form of near-death experience.
Why do you think that is?
Because I don't think there's much to be done. There are certain things that need to be determined in the case of an adult, things that need to be worked out before maybe judgment can occur, or things that need, maybe there's a purgative state that's going to take place or something of that nature. So, adults typically, maybe it's just their memory. They don't remember it as well because maybe they have a higher incidence of dark experiences. Children who have near-death experiences, almost 100% have good ones. Whereas if you get to adulthood, it's an 80-20 split.
Wow.
And when
you say they have a dark experience of near-death, it's like a hellish experience, like they would be going to hell potentially.
Yeah, a lot of them are hellish with demonic beings, but some of them are like very lonely.
And is that because theoretically, again, talking spiritually now in terms of, well, the soul is spiritual, but talking in terms of, our faith, Christianity, that's because perhaps they didn't want to be with God. And so upon death, maybe their final choice of, I don't want God who is love, then their near-death experience is like this radical existential isolation, which is ultimately hellish because they're rejecting love and God.
I agree. It could be, that might be the scenario in question, but it's so hard to say because, we don't have data. We just know one thing. People who have hellish experiences, when they come back, the vast majority reform their lives.
They want to become Christians.
They
Wow.
Yeah.